Hello guys, welcome to the session. So this will be where we're going to make the entire end-to-end framework for our Cypress, right? So from previous sessions, if you would have seen, we have covered some core concepts and some important methods. So I will leave this folder as it is, right? And as I told at the beginning of the series that we will be using another folder for writing our entire framework structure. So let's get started in integration. I'm just going to create a new folder, right? Click over here and let's just name it as project. I leave test. I leave this test folder as it is. I'm not going to delete it for now. So within the project, I will create two folders. One would be UI, so which will contain my UI tests, and also there can be some API level testing that we can do. So I'll just name it as API. Right. So that will basically my backend, and this one where we will be testing our front end within the UI folder. Right. So basically we let's say there are our application under test. So that's our application under test. And in this, we're going to cover this entire practice form. And then we're going to cover about alerts. Okay? And then moving forward, the other elements that we have, the most common elements that we have in today's web page. So we'll be covering all. Now, I'm just going to make a folder structure as per these. So in your app, whichever application you might have taken, it might be different pages, it might be different tabs. So I'm just going to make my entire folder structure as per individual tab. Within UI, I'll make a folder, and let's say I'm just going to keep my page objects in this one, and I'll make another folder within the UI where I'm just going to name it as tests. Okay, so my page objects, basically my in Selenium we have XPaths or CSS selectors. We keep it in a separate folder. That's where I'm going to maintain those, and in my tests I'll have the actual tests. All right. Okay, so I already have it. Okay, yeah, so that is a previous folder. Let it be. So on Cypress, in Cypress.json, now I have to change my the spec.js references. Right? Since I'm going to use another integration folder, so the key to change the integration folder is integration folder, right? And the value would be within my Cypress. Right? I have a integration folder, and then I have a project. So basically, I'm telling Cypress, go ahead and find all my tests from this path. So whatever spec.js files are within the project, that will be considered for running. Okay. Also, I need to maintain my data somewhere. So as we covered in previous sessions as well, data we will keep in fixtures. Right? Within fixtures, I will create another file and name it as. So this one is like my. So first we will automate practice form. Just name it as form.json. Okay. Within this form, we have name, email, gender, date of birth, subjects, hobbies, and all this data, entire data that will be going into this website for testing. We will put it over here. Okay. Now let's just start our first test. Within test folder, let's create a file, our main spec file, and let's just name it as practiceform.spec.js, or let's just give it more relevant form. I'm just going to say test01 underscore form. So I have covered in one of the videos, guys, in the core concept sessions, that you have to name your tests in serial order. So that is how Cypress picks up. Or if you want to, have a different order of execution, then it should be inside a different folders, right? So you can refer to that video for details. So I'll be following this naming convention for my tests. So it will be 01, 02, 03, right? So on and so forth. Okay, so within the test, let's just write our first suit. That suit would do. So I'm just going to follow the context of describe and it. right? If you are following a specify and context, that is on you. You can also do that. So this concept we have covered in our videos. I will just name it as this is my practice form suite. So separate by comma and then our fat arrow syntax. So my entire test will go inside this suite. Alright. So since I have different pages, I will probably navigate to different URLs. Oh, yeah. So I have to copy this. And in order to navigate to URL for this suite, I have to write a before annotation, before executes, before all the tests. Let's just say before all tests. You can name it anything. So I just like to keep it as before all tests so that it looks more relevant. All right. Within this, what we're going to do is we're going to visit the URL. Just write cy dot visit and your URL. Okay, so we're going to read it from Fixtures file in a moment, right? But for now, just keep as it is. Right. So let's just write a basic test first, and then we're going to restructure everything. And then I would have a test case. So test case is written by it, and its format is almost similar to how we write our suite, how we write our other hooks such as before and after. In here, I'm just going to say fill form data, right? And then your fat arrow syntax over here. In here goes our entire, objects or whatever we need to do with the data that we have to fill for this form. Okay, so let's just save it, and initially let's just try to run it. Let's see what actually happens for this simple test case. Npx Cypress open. We're going to use test runner for this, and then moving forward we'll run as headless, and then we're going to integrate with Jenkins and Docker. We'll build a proper pipeline like we do in our industrial projects. So since I'm opening it for the first time, it might take a while to open it. So as it opens up, let's just create our data. So in my form.json file, right, so we have to keep our data. So just have these curly braces over here, and I have already made the data. So just to ease out our job, because there's no point in writing this data, because this is quite a simple one. I'm just going to copy paste the same itself. So we already have that. So this is my data, guys, that I'm going to use. Okay, and over here I can also add my URL. So what will be my URL? I'm just going to copy this, and okay, let's just run it first, then we're going to make this change. Okay, so test runner is open. So we have the spec file. We have changed the integration folder now. Click on this one, and since we have selected Chrome 91, so it should open up the URL and it should navigate to it. So that's a simple test case, that it is just navigating to a URL. So we have this fill form data. It is a test that we have kept the name over here. Test is fill form data, and our suite is before all tests. So which going to be there in a moment. Practice form suite. Okay, over here, and then our before annotation will execute before all tests. This is a before all. Okay, so it has almost finished execution. So it's just as I mentioned, guys, in my core concept videos also, you need not verify that the URL should be visited and then 200 should be returned. Over here, if you would see, right, it is already sending the response the 200, which means the navigation has been successful. So these are built-in assertions that are within that are built within the Cypress by default. So for that, you can refer to assertions video where I've covered assertions in bit more detail. All right, guys. So far so good. Let's now shift this through our data file. And now how we're going to link the two. So in my before test, we're going to use cv.fixture. So that's the method right, which sci commands provide us so that we can read our fixture file. With simple concepts, simple method cv.fixture. And guys, thankfully, all the methods in Cypress they follow the same format. First of all, you need to name the fixture name. Over here, for us, it is form. What we are basically saying is this entire line just reads the fixture file form.json. Okay, so there are some default formats it reads. Right, so one of the format is .json. So you need not specify the format over here. Right, so that is understood by the Cypress. You just need to provide the name. What you're saying once you have read the fixture file, right, once you have successfully read the form.json file, then we have to chain it with dot then. And then this thing, as I told, you cannot have a synchronous execution in Cypress. Cypress works asynchronously, which means only after something has been successfully done, you should do the next step. Right? So which is also the core building concept of any framework. So only after a URL is visited, you should try and enter something into the page. Right, in Selenium we have to handle with a lot of waits. We have to all use page load timeout or wait for entire document to load. But in Cypress it is handled within, right? So I've also covered in the core concepts where we talked about how Cypress waits for default, and there are 8 or 9 things that Cypress checks before even interacting with elements. So in a way it actually avoids a lot of laky tests. So over here I have the data now, so now I have to just play with that data. So in here I'm just going to use cv.visit. So I have to just catch that now. So I'll just catch it in an element, let's say dollar form data. So I read the form dot then whatever it is returned from here, I've caught in here, and over here I'm just going to say form data dot. So what is the name? URL. So that's the name that we have kept. You need not enclose the semicolon, guys, just for readability purposes. I would generally prefer end it with a semicolon. And over here, yeah, so our key is URL. I'm going to use the same URL key. Let's just see whether it's working fine or not. Now we have got some error. What's the error? Form data is not defined. Sorry guys. Okay. All right. So it's working. So I just missed that complete variable name. Right. So I have also covered this. What is the difference between normal variable and one which is in which we use a dollar before that in one of my core concept videos. So I hope guys you're coming into this building end-to-end framework after visiting the core concept videos. Right. So this is how it is, guys. So that is my first basic test, and that is how we link a JSON file to a test spec file. But I also told you that we're not going to keep these things in an actual test. So entire thing we're going to move it to another folder which is page objects. So this is not how I'm going to carry out my entire things, right? But let's just build something, then we're going to move this entire thing in page objects, and then we will see how we can link it. All right. So in here I have visited the URL, and over here my test starts. So let's just say the first thing that I need to do is I just need to fill the name. How can I get the CSS selector? Click over here. That's hash first name. By default, Cypress works on CSS selectors. Right. So this is my ID. Anything with hash is ID. All right. So let me just paste it over here. So that's my ID. And let me just take a couple of elements, and then we're going to probably build properly. Let's take last name. Okay. So that's my last name. And let's take email as well. So that's an inbuilt element identifier of Cypress that we can use, which is This one is basically some sort of now we have to do is type into it. So what we're going to do is cy dot, first we need to get the element. All right, get the element with id first name. Right, so once you get it, dot then, or let's not use then, let's just say dot type. What you're going to type over here is the form data. So over here, guys, there is one there is one catch. So this variable cannot be accessed in here, right? So you cannot do that. I'll just show you. Dollar form data dot. What we need from there is first name. That's my key. Okay, so let's see if this works. Save it, and Cypress has picked up like there are changes to the test, and it has started execution. So it should be dollar form data is not defined. So that's the error. That is what when I meant, like, guys, you cannot just have a execution somewhat like what we are trying over here is we have read this, but after you come out of the before annotation there is no visibility. That is not something that we have defined on global level, right? So we always have to chain the Cypress commands. So over here I just need to do the same thing. cy.fixture, for this test read the data from form dot then you can just catch that variable dollar form data. You can name it the same because anyways the visibility is different, right? That's in a before hook and this is in a test hook. Now over here if I'm going to do like this, so that's the way it should work now. Yep. Hold on a second, what's now? Okay, sorry guys, there's a spelling mistakes. Alright, so it should work now. Yeah, so it has typed in automation and it's quite fast as well, guys. So that is how our fill form data before all and the test body. So this is our test annotation, it goes in. Now let me just copy paste it and let's just enter the value for all the three. So that's my last name and that's my user email. So over here, guys, we'll be building the skeleton first. Then we're going to move ahead and cover some important aspects. Okay, so I just copy this from this JSON file. That'll be a bit easier. That's my email. Okay, so this should get working. But now this is not what we want to do, right? We cannot just have this entire data sitting in my test file, right? There should be some central location. So we will move to start with these three fields into page objects, right? So let's just see what test runner has gotten us. So it has executed automation QA, whatever the value we gave, and then our email at email.com. Yeah, that's great, guys. It's working now. Now, how are we going to move this data to a page object? Let's just create a file first. Name it as let's say form data.spec.js. Okay, or let's just make it more relevant. Form objects. So I will use a normal JavaScript class, right? And I'm going to create a constructor, and then I'm going to create an object of that class in my test file, so that whenever this test file is called, we have already the initialized data, right? And then we need not, you know, just keep on piling up my test with that bulk load of data. So entire data would be inside this form object.spec.js file, right? In if tomorrow if there is any change, so that is the only file that you need to change. The rest of your test specs, it will never be changed. All right, so I will just create a class and let's name it as form. Right, so this is nothing to do with Cypress, guys. This is a JavaScript now code that we're going to do. Now I'm going to create a constructor. So in Java, we use constructor for initialization. So whenever we call the object of the class, we initialize things beforehand.